Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We still have folks joining. We're waiting on a couple more individuals to hop in the room from another meeting next door. So we're going to start the meeting in just a couple of minutes. If you're joining on Zoom, help us out and put your affiliation into the chat window for us, please. Thank you. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the August 15th meeting of the Regional Operations and Safety Advisory Committee. We have quite a few people joining us on Zoom and in the room here. Let me start by showing the agenda.
Are you recording this?
Yes, Teresa is recording this meeting.
Can't tell you how many times I forgot to hit record.
What is my agenda then? Okay. So, Mark, I'm just gonna hit share screen. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Or you can share apps, but
Okay. On the agenda today, we'll do a quick round of introductions, see if there's any public comments, and then the main feature of this meeting is a presentation on the Vision Zero Safety Action Plan. Alex Cohn, next to me, will be presenting the updates that you see here. And then we will wrap up with a few Transportation Council updates at the end of the meeting. You want to go around the room and introduce everyone in the room, and then I'll read out who's on Zoom. Why don't you start, Carrie?
Sure, Carrie Ward with the Capital Region Transportation Council.
Andrew Tracy, also with the Transportation Council.
Alex Cohn with Cambridge Systematics.
Matthew Rowe with Sandpack.
Mark Castiglione with the Regional Planning Commission.
John Warner representing Saratoga County. Robbie McHugh with the Town Colony and the EMS Department.
Siobhan Terrell with Cambridge Systematics.
Okay, and I will read out who's joining us on Zoom. Joining us, Aubrey Feldman, Audrey Bernison, Ben Wolf, Chaim and Chris from our office.
Guy Vigliotti with Cambridge Systematics, who's been helping me out with the analysis.
Okay, John Hartley, I believe he's from Stantec on your team as well. Justin O'Connor, Kelly Kircher, and Teresa LaSalle. And Tom, if you could put your name or your affiliation in the chat window for us, that would be really helpful. And I believe that's, oops. Looks like we're going to admit Robert Zatowski from DOT main office and Nasheed Kadim.
Yep, I'm with our team.
Okay, very good. Okay. Next on the agenda, public comment. Carrie, were there any, I guess we just open the floor. Any members of the public wish to weigh in at this time? Just take a quick look at Zoom and make sure I haven't missed anything. Okay. Very good. So I'll turn things over now to Alex Cohn. Alex, I'll get your slides pulled up for the Vision Zero Safety Action Plan update. And then I think I'll just slide the laptop over to you.
Sounds good.
Teresa, I'm gonna have this on full screen, so I won't be able to monitor Zoom, so if you could just watch the waiting room for us. That would be really helpful. Is this the full screen button? Read mode? Is this it? Yeah. Okay, so everybody make it even more full screen? Okay.
You go up to view in the upper left. Oops, it's gonna, now it's gonna.
One moment, we're using an unfamiliar laptop. All right, full screen mode. Okay. Awesome. Can someone on Zoom let us know verbally if you're able to see the title slide?
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you very much. All right, we'll turn things over to you, Alex.
Well, thank you, everyone. Alex Cohen, Cambridge Systematics, here to provide an update on the progress we're making on the Vision Zero action plan. Appreciate being supported by our team members here today. Matthew Rowe and John Hartley with Stantec, and also from Cambridge, we have Siobhan Terrell with me in the room, and Guy Venemiati in our Oakland office. Today's agenda wanted to run through a lot of slides showing kind of where we're at with building a lot of the foundation of the analysis work that we're doing as we're going to come in towards looking at doing some localized planning and then building overall regional recommendations and strategies. Have some discussions on target setting and some of the policy and process change focus areas as we do that, and as well as looking forward to discussing just a few updates too while we're here. First of all, for the historical trend analysis, one thing that has come up in some conversation is I just wanted to take a step back, and I know there were a couple of emails around here just discussing some of the data sources, because I think we'll be jumping around between some of the data sources that we use throughout the process, and they're all valid. They all come, but you know, you will pull your hair out trying to necessarily compare them all, and for different reasons. So what I want to do is just kind of highlight a little bit of some of the different sources, particularly where they come from, is that whereas the Institute for Traffic Safety and Management and Research, their helpful online dashboard that uses only police reported crashes, while NISDOT's Clear Safety app and their data viewer also include non-police reported crashes. And also, whereas NISDOT will continue to add crashes over time, whereas ITSMR kind of has a hard cutoff. So those are really some of the two reasons why some of the numbers do not quite add up the same. And so, and then the fatal accident review system over there, the national database, that, you know, that information is really finalized with an entire year lag. So we use that data to a lesser degree as well. So we use each of these three data sets, and hopefully, like using different cutting boards for kind of cutting raw meat and maybe vegetables. We try not to use the same thing for doing, you know, cutting up some, you know, vegetables right after you cut up some chicken. Not that it's as stark as that, but that just want to make sure that as we kind of have some guiding principles of what we want to do with the data is, really maintaining a focus on tracking progress year over year. So if it's the same data set, we can continue to use it year over year, whether or not we're debating it. But that way we're having a solid, foundation of talking of what we're tracking. Creating a replicable process as well here too. There's some of the performance measures, I thought maybe it's easier to potentially use the TSSR as opposed to FARS because it's easy to get and the speed's quicker and it helps for annual reporting sooner than later. Even though we do made the federal performance measures are different. We want to recognize some of the limitations in data completeness, and I'll kind of highlight some of those things. There's been tremendous, advances in data over the years. I'd like to talk about how some of the first safety planners who I worked with, got their start using punch cards. And we've come a long way, and the numbers of completeness and accuracy we're getting, it gets better year over year. And so certainly, appreciate the work that the, state's doing on the information system strategic plan. We're getting there more and more each year. But I want to make sure that we're avoiding conflating different sets of numbers as we kind of move towards different performance metrics or using them, using different data sets in different areas. One thing that we've done for the national performance measures is using the TSSR data as opposed to FARS for the fatality rates, just so that's something that that would be different than what you guys would go, what CRTC would show to the board, for their annual approval. But that would be potentially helpful for just saying, hey, how are we doing, putting out this on the website, putting things out there, reporting, putting on our eventual dashboard. So. And as we get towards, Carrie, did we send out to this group the historical trends memorandum yet, or we'll follow up?
No, we will follow up after the meeting with that.
We'll follow up with that. Great. So we have some of the highlight. We'll go through some of the highlight. Some of this will be a bit of a preview highlight reel. And we're looking forward to, and I hope some of this gives a bit of context as we get towards sending that out. And we want to make sure that, this information is germane and, beginning to tell a story of what we want to do. One thing that, we've also wanted to show is particularly, why we focus on fatal and severe injuries. Yes, they're the most severe crashes we have. They're the fewest types of crashes we have, but they're the most severe. So this total crash severity is based on projected economic and quality of life and quality of life years lost, for each of these two crashes. So these crashes are less than 3% of the total, but over about 60% or more of the total economic impact, if that's the measure we use. Some of the vehicles involved in the fatal and serious injury crashes. So really, obviously, cars, vans, pickup trucks are most significant ones. Commercial trucks, so not your F-150s, but your commercial motor vehicles. Motorcycles, as we get into some emphasis areas, we'll see it looks like a smaller slice of the pie, but when we get into severity, they make up a significant number of the fatal and serious injury fatalities that we have. Bicycle pedestrians are not shown on this here too, because these are particularly some of the vehicles that are involved in the crashes. By municipality, some of the overall, just kind of a breakdown of where the crashes are happening. And this is, this does not indicate that, we shouldn't pay attention to Watervliet or Cohoes. There are roads and intersections in those places that actually do merit a lot of concern, but just kind of an overall, some, where we're seeing some of these issues. The other, we will delve into more. I think we're gonna look on relabeling that because there are a lot of crashes are reviewed by DMV, so we're gonna probably look at having ones that are reviewed by DMV and then maybe those that aren't.
Can I ask what the time period is for this?
Oh, sure. This is 2019 through 2023. So all of these crashes through this are 2019 through 2023 5-year period. Crashes by functional classification. The crashes, really, I mean, where we've seen nearly half of our crashes are on those principal arterial other facilities. I mean, and really with our fatal and serious injuries. So as we look at where we're gonna be looking to target, a lot of strategies are on those roads. It's also where we have a lot of VMT as well, but and then we see a lot of range of other crashes on our roads throughout our rural areas as well. So most split by urban and rural and functional classification. Roadway ownership. One thing that's great about doing this plan is that we've been able to, bring everybody together to the table. So as we look at strategies, I mean, there is, it's very true to the safe system approach. The responsibility is shared, and that it's going to take, the participation and the support of everyone from our cities, our towns, our villages, our counties, and DOT to reduce our fatal and severe injury crashes. One thing that really helps as we take a look at crashes is to identify emphasis areas. These are identified in the New York State Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and there are 7 on the inner ring are 7 emphasis areas. Intersections, vulnerable road users, road user behavior, roadway departures, alternate road vehicles, crashes, age-related and aggressive driving. These are emphasis areas are a helpful framework to break down, to just, if you take a look at a map, all the crashes, I mean, it just looks like the stars in the sky. Where do you see constellations? Where do you see patterns? Where do you see any grouping of galaxy, solar systems, etc.? So emphasis areas really kind of help connect, are that framework to identify how you might provide a typology of crashes, how you might look at analyzing them further, and then eventually connecting them with countermeasures and strategies so you can reduce them. And emphasis areas, there's not a hierarchy that, oh, this is more vital than, one's more important than the other, which, maybe which emphasis area played a greater role, in the causation, either before, during, or after a crash, rather that they're all just, different starting points for taking a look at how you might begin to reduce crashes. This chart on the outer ring within those 7 emphasis areas are some of the different crash types, road users, locations, crash types that comprise each of those emphasis areas. I will particularly note that that this total shows duplicative crashes. Well, I mean, an individual crash can contribute to more than one emphasis area. So if you have a younger driver who's speeding through an intersection and hit a pedestrian, that would be represented on all of these. This isn't exactly the overall magnitude of what each of them are, but it really does is help break out of maybe some of the silos in which I work or which Robbie works. And we think that there's some more cross collaboration here that we need to be thinking about. So that's what I think the emphasis areas are helpful for. Any questions on these before I jump ahead?
This information will be available.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have this in our technical memo as well, and so breaking down kind of where we have some of the trends too, how they've been going. Have some of these been going up or down over the last few years, how we compared? Is this region doing? Is the trend better or worse than the statewide?
If you're on Zoom and you have a question, we can't see the Zoom interface right now, so just go ahead and unmute and then call out if you have a question.
I'll try to take some additional pauses too.
Okay,
So what we wanted to do too, today is preview some additional analysis that we've been looking at is really identify where we see some intersection between different emphasis areas. So where we really have, an opportunity to, if we're addressing intersections, are we also helping vulnerable road users? Are we looking at younger drivers, motorcyclists? Where are some of their crashes, or are there different target audiences we ought to be looking at for education and enforcement? So, the emphasis areas are kind of a, all of the above approach, and everybody, and it's big. Overall, the emphasis areas are over 90% of all the crashes in the fatal and severe injury crashes in the region. But if we wanted to really look at some, begin to target some strategies in some particular locations or towards particular users, we wanted to look at this. Intersections are well represented because in the kind of the middle of the grid, due to there's conflict points there. At each intersection, there are multiple conflict points. But, kind of also in some of the purple, looking at issues that we have with motorcycles, really unsafe speed and roadway departure, kind of looking at what are the treatments that we may look at in those areas. If we're looking at roadway departures, can we make sure that we're having design features that also help motorcyclists? Looking at particular issues affecting different age populations. I wouldn't have expected to see more distracted crashes amongst those 65 plus than I did 16 to 20, but that's true as well. And also within here as well, really we want to identify some of where the other top issues, areas where there's that overlap as well. Because if we begin to address one emphasis area, what other emphasis, how do we approach those strategies that will hopefully have synergy with their other emphasis areas as well? So if we're looking at unsafe speed, making, we're helping to, if we were doing engineering or enforcement solutions, that we are reducing the risk of aggressive driving. I don't want to say possibly mitigating the effects of alcohol, but if we're reducing alcohol, alcohol impaired driving, we're also reducing, those higher speed vehicles on the road at certain times as well. So I think there's probably some little room to go here for us to identify maybe some of these top intersections, but as we look to revising our historical trends memo, we'll be identifying these key intersections. Intersecting emphasis areas. Any questions? Open the floor, see kind of on this quick summary. Are there any trends, do the trends show any results that people didn't expect? Or something that we think that we're missing? Should we continue to look at some of those emphasis areas for all the region? Any targets that we and performance measures that we should be considering. This is just suggested, ones.
One thing that I think might be helpful to look into, it's clear intersections are one of the emphasis areas, one of the main contributing factors. I think that's the case everywhere. On an earlier slide, you had a breakdown of crashes on state highways versus local roads, and it looked like it was about half and half. But I wonder if my impression is that a lot of the state highway intersections around here, maybe they're higher volume or more likely to be signalized, or maybe it just, I don't know, in many places, it feels like they've gotten attention more recently, maybe that they're more recent built out, maybe they're a little safer. I wonder if there's some difference in crash rates at intersections between state highways and local roads, at local intersections.
Okay,
I wonder if it would make sense for us to say, we should find the intersections in local jurisdictions that maybe they were built 100 years ago and haven't received any attention since, and maybe that's where we could get good value from our investment if we upgraded those intersections.
Okay, yeah, because the functional classification has been inclusive of both segments and roadways, but we could see about breaking that out for both segments and roadways in these areas.
For segments
Segments,
and intersections.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm looking at like Saratoga County. A lot of rural areas, towns that I don't even think participate in the CRTC process. That Sandy's going to go and address the county board of supervisors in a couple of weeks. But I think a lot of them just don't have the technical know-how or access to it, and
Right.
they're not at the table to take part. So I see this as a big challenge with having the access being local road system. So from Saratoga County point of view, I think.
No, and that's, really tip our hat to CITC for continuing to be, a leader in this effort. Even when I was working for the NPO in Rochester, it was kind of, always looked over, over the desk here to see what they were doing. And yeah, I think what this plan's really there to do is kind of help to provide some of that information, really provide that context, help narrow the focus, because then otherwise you're just looking at the stars in the sky and what can you do? I mean, and that's, and there are different ways that we're really drilling down, whether it's through the emphasis areas, whether it's through looking at specific locations, which we'll get into as well. There's different ways of slicing or dicing that data. But that just creates more points of entry in which to, find solutions. Any other questions?
Not sure how easy it would be to take this data set and break it down to see if there's a difference by municipality, because I noticed the city of Albany, I think, was #1 in crashes. Give them their data. Town of Colony was second in crashes. It'd be interesting to see our data. Is there a difference? Are we seeing more intersections to your point too?
Oh, yeah, and one thing that we'll be doing as part of this project too is having an interactive dashboard. And Guy, who's on the line here, has been coming up with new things for us to develop in Power BI. So yeah, as we look towards doing this work, well, it's not this chart, but really looking at these totals of emphasis areas too. So yeah, as we revise the chart here, what are your top 3 in Colony, or countywide, or county outside of Saratoga Springs or Boston Spa. So yeah, I mean, as you get out in the rural areas, roadway departure is going to be a bigger slice of that pie. Thank you. Target setting. I hope you guys liked graphs, because we have some more. Is one thing as part of this plan here. We're looking. It's already in the name, is Vision Zero. So be looking to establish a target, really have a commitment together. I mean, this isn't, just an analytical study that, we'll kind of use as a reference here. We're really hoping this to be a shared action plan for everyone around. And part of that's really creating an aspirational goal. But, one that we think hopefully can be achieved. So what I, like to do is I personally find compelling is really taking a step back of where we've been. So using a rolling 5-year average back to where we started really collecting of available fatality data. I mean, if you start going back, into the 60s, those numbers are even higher. Before we started even having some seatbelts in cars, that, within this region and other places where we made this graph, there's been a compelling downfall. I mean, really, from that peak in that, 1979.
What happened in the 95? Is that seatbelts?
So I mean, over this period, yeah, I mean, we've had improvements in vehicle technology.
No, there's a precipitous decline for 4 years right there. That just.
The nineties.
Yeah,
I didn't know if
and
there was any attribute to that just that down, because
This
then
one-
after that down, it levels out.
that one is more stark than any other region in which we work in.
Oh, okay.
So that's that one's unique. For sure. And
A little more.
yeah, that one's interesting for sure. But we did see a lot throughout, in other places throughout the 90s. So I mean, a lot of vehicle technology got better. Different changes in societal norms around impaired driving, made improvements to roadways throughout all this period too. So a myriad of different factors. And then to the right, we have a forecast line. So that's what we took a straight line forecast from 1979 and said, well, where do we go? Nationally and thankfully to a lesser degree in this region, we have seen an increase in fatalities, COVID related and other changes in behavior we've seen on the roadways, changes in traffic patterns. But, if we take a look at a long-term trend, we've had ups and downs before, and the hope is that through proactive planning, working together, having a strategic vision, we'll be able to, get back down onto that downward trend. So the trend does show hitting zero around 2045, 2046. That is the simplest trend line that we can make, but it's really kind of a starting point of where we're going. That is not a guarantee. That I would not expect history to ever work on a straight line. There are a lot of different paths within different emphasis areas, different jurisdictions, but we really hope that all those different paths will, converge on a road towards zero. And kind of, so what has been the annual reduction over this period of time? I mean, like to think of, what would that take on a year-over-year basis? So on average, throughout this period, there's been an approximate 2% reduction in fatalities each year. With the 90s being an outlier. Maybe an outlier, maybe a good boost of performance. But probably, really 1 to 2%. So if we take a look at some of the midterm over what we've seen, and this is sort of switching data sets to the most recent traffic statistic repository. Just want to throw that out there. So there's a little bit of difference. So we took a look at kind of over the last 5 years. But yeah, actually crazy to see if we're going to get to zero. But so we don't want to just use our latest 5 years as our basis. We've had decreases in the past. I think we can get there again. If we used the upcoming long-range plan horizon 2050, if we said, okay, zero straight line to there, that would be, that amount. And then just for a bit of reference, you know, if we did 5 or, 10% a year, what would that take over that period of time too? So probably a little closer to 10% on it. On average, it kind of did a compounded growth. So this would take some performance closer to what we've had in the 90s to get to there. And as part of the plan, there's a commitment to, set a Vision Zero target, to commit to it. New York State doesn't have a specific year in mind, but it can be something that, should be considered really as part of this plan. Also go through some serious injuries as well here, but so there's considerable progress that can be made, in the near term. Obviously, as you get closer to 0, it's going to get ever harder and harder, but that's a good challenge to have once you get there. There's any thoughts on kind of some of this as enforcing, helping to commit towards a vision goal for the plan?
Do you know of any other regions that have set a specific target year and what year they chose?
Ithaca, I think we were in like 2040, 2045. Smaller region.
I know that I think Florida as a state is one of the few states that adopted a Vision Zero policy statewide. Do you know what their target? I was just reading about, I don't remember what their target year was, but.
I know Texas has like half by 2035 and then like a limited 0 by 2050.
Okay.
We could come back with some of this. Now I'm looking at this one differently. We could probably look at some stair step times.
I was always waiting on autonomous vehicles to come in and just take it down to 0.
Though they've been kind of helping raise some numbers in some places too, so they're mixed bag.
I know. The only thing I brought up at one of our earlier meetings, not this kind of meeting, but is they do rely on road markings. They do like that to see the road, and that was one of those like, because we do roads, to make sure that, county roads and make sure edge lines, center lines, everything so that works. But, my car will stop me if I'm about to hit something and, it'll lane detect, and that's not even really a new car. And that's why I was hoping for that drop off, like the seatbelt drop off, like whatever that was. I was hoping for one of those. It seems, I don't know, it's a vision. I can see it doing what it does, kind of bottoming out and kind of like.
A lot of what I've seen for planning for autonomous vehicle readiness is just like what you said. The striping has to be there, but also the signs and signals need to be in exactly,
Right.
or places where the car will be looking. It can't be too far out of, what the METCD wants.
Right.
But doing all that stuff is good for human drivers too. So, we could say, well, we're doing all this stuff for autonomous vehicle readiness, but in the meantime, it's gonna help everyone to have more standard, the signals and signage and everything up to modern standards. But I do think it would mean if autonomous vehicles do ever become mainstream, I think it would be everyone would have to stripe their roads far more frequently than they do now.
Yeah. The only part that I don't know I'm sorry, I missed a bunch. I had an issue with that. But is, a lot of times when there is a fatality, I don't know a lot. 20% is that there's something involved that has nothing to do with driving or engineering, if you're under the influence or if you're, so I don't know how do you factor that out? I mean, it's just a statement, right? It's a goal. But you have that in here, like, because you can't address like that's one of the problems that we have sometimes with speeding in the city is that, there was an accident at this intersection, right? Well, she was drunk. We have to combat the drunk. The drunk is what caused the accident. The signage didn't. The fact that it's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit didn't. The person who was behind the wheel couldn't drive.
Yeah, and if we get
So-
into some of our emphasis area strategy, I mean, how do we deal with, impaired driving, and there's. How do we support, programs, alternatives in our bar districts, supporting those alternative modes, maybe stepped up enforcement, also, helping to, through these efforts, kind of reinforce that societal norm, which I think we're starting to see a little slipping in the past couple of years.
Cause, I mean, just my opinion on all this from seeing things in the city is that I think we're gonna be fighting things as we try to go down. There's gonna be forces trying to keep us up. And right now I see that as being all this micro mobility and everybody on the road and things that aren't vehicles. We have a lot of that in cities. And they do not obey any type of traffic law because they don't view themselves as traffic. They view themselves as this autonomous pedestrian, bicycle, vehicle thing to go wherever we want. So we can still get down. I just always feel like there's gonna be these forces holding us from going to zero. And that's probably just cynical of me.
No, and that's, yeah, I mean, certainly don't want to assume zero, and that's what really, as we get towards the curves, help really show that as we make reductions, it's going to be
But
harder.
yeah,
But as we get under that number of 10 fatalities, I mean, that's, a great solution to have. But I mean, hopefully we said, hey, if we even had half,
Right.
back,
No.
if we're in 1980 right now,
Well, a reduction is a reduction. And you have all the data, so you just go with the data.
well, no, I think what we want to do is by taking a look at that long-term, is really connecting the dots between Vision Zero and what are the numbers we're seeing on an annual basis. Just, well, it was a tough year, oh, it was COVID. I mean, are we going to be, how are we holding ourselves to the fire? How are we making safety being, continuing to have that be a central focus at CRTC board, city council in Schenectady. So maybe we can come back, I think, with showing some more steps of that. Kind of what it would take to get towards some of those reductions over some middle periods. And kind of keeping that longer term horizon out there. Yeah, because even getting towards that 5% reduction, it's kind of would be a little high.
Based on that conversation, I'd be interested, based off your previous request, to see if there's areas or types of roadways where impaired driving is a higher impact. Because I would say even if someone's impaired driving, a roundabout is going to be safer than another type of intersection, for example. So there is some role that the design. I mean, yeah, if someone's going like 60 through a roundabout, they're gonna, but even if you're impaired, you slow down at a roundabout, even if you're going faster. So to see if there is evidence of like, there's a higher proportion of impaired driving fatalities or serious injuries on specific types of, in specific conditions.
Right, and we see the geographic pattern, and that's fine, right? I think, seeing the geographic pattern of where the crashes are, I think, what did you say? I think I added up the numbers that, urban arterial streets, both minor and major streets, not highways, added up to just a smidge under 50% of the total KSI for the whole region. So we know that, those same folks we know they're drunk on local streets too. It's not where they're most getting in trouble. So we have this, it's like sending light through Swiss cheese, right? If you have enough slices of Swiss cheese, no light will get through. I guess Swiss cheese is a little bit transparent, but we have some engineering tools, we have some other tools, but and design tools, we need to. I think this data is showing us that we need to do everything. So.
It does, and we'll, I think, try to break down some more of maybe that period of time. So whether we look at, here are some significant jumps that I think we could try to see. We'll try to maybe put some some more periodization in this. But certainly what we want to be able to have is show that something that, we're sticking to each year. Differently than maybe kind of how we're looking at the state performance measures, which have their own process and their own logic to them. So how do we, and so that Vision Zero too is not just, oh, well, how are, we don't want to have a backlash a few years down the line as we, see some increases or have, say, oh, can't ever be done, we throw it out.
Yeah, we're in for the long haul.
We've seen some similar, trends with, serious fatalities as well. Looking at
Serious.
serious injuries, I say serious fatalities.
Yeah.
Okay, they're all precious. And so just kind of looking at, okay, if we reduce it by 50% by 2050, 0 by 2050, what are those trends like? And so actually a little closer, maybe having that 5% reduction in serious injuries. Might be a little more attainable, but still aggressive, and I think we will look at some additional ways of breaking that down, considering previous trends in the region. And I think there are other dates we could consider. I mean, and this was us just looking, using 2050 as the long range plan kind of horizon.
And maybe you're looking at this wrong, but if fatalities do decrease, serious injuries may increase unless we can overall drop the amount of accidents and incidents.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, by crashes that maybe have less kinetic energy, there, or being a slightly safer car. I mean, that's hopefully the hope is that that's the focus, that we could still see the same number of crashes, but hopefully we continue to reduce that severity.
As we look at post-crash care, 40% of the patients we see that were of the patients who died at the hospital, I think that the statistic is 40% of them were alive when EMS saw them. So what are the opportunities when we do interact with these patients? New York State just approved whole blood, which is a big way to decrease mortality, to deliver blood products sooner to patients instead of waiting until they get to the trauma center, which has been proven to reduce fatalities. So there are definitely some post-crash care elements in there.
That's a good stat. I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's a great stat, actually, and partially some of the reason we actually, that's one of the things I forgot to mention, actually, over that long-term decrease is actually the role of EMS in that process. Reducing crashes that would have otherwise been fatalities.
So I wouldn't worry about the impact of doing that on the serious injury numbers, because we're gonna need to be decreasing serious injuries a lot just to get the fatalities down.
But to your point is more about what the effect of roundabout would have on traffic, which is that we put one in Schenectady and our crashes went up. But we don't have any serious crashes.
Right.
We haven't had a fatality, but we do have a lot of glancing blows.
Right.
So,
Because there's no right angle.
right, there's no right angle. Everybody's just kind of rubbing.
Yeah, and so that's what we'll take a look at is looking at using kind of like, okay, the equivalent of property damage only equivalents. So that's like a metric we'll use. So like, okay, if there's 2 fatals, 5 serious injuries, and 20 property damage only, but now there's 24 property damage only, that's a whole lot less than what we would have had if we would have had the fuller fatals and serious injuries.
By the sometimes grim practice of we need to assign costs to these things. There's a reason we have to do that ultimately.
Um. One other task that we're, other pot we have on the stove, is developing our equity priority areas. The equity priority areas, there are, some out there, we're kind of for looking at environmental justice, identifying disadvantaged communities, both at the NPO, state and federal levels. What we wanted to do is we are in a ways recasting some of these same demographics. What we want to do is make sure that we're identifying burdens, related to transportation safety. We want to make sure that we're centering equity in our process so that we help prioritize and select recommendations that really will reduce crashes in those identified areas. So we're building upon some of the Title VI and EJ analysis that we've done, looking to align it with Justice 40, because that will help with applying for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grants. And we're doing a couple of analysis steps. We've been doing a lot of math with the census data, but we think that kind of really helps narrow the scope of some of the areas we're looking at. And we'll show into some of the crash analysis that I think we're getting close to kind of finding some of those areas that really have particular crash burdens. So we added a few additional indicators on top of what's in CRTC's environmental justice categories, again, single family parent households, zero car households, and those that are foreign born as well. Just broadening some of the scope of some areas that may have different transportation needs and, react to the system, the transportation system differently. Cross section. So what we did, so threshold analysis is at first looking at those within each census tract, looking at community populations that have a percentage over those regional averages for each of the indicators. So on the average census tract, or actually, sorry, not the average census tract, so that regional total. So each census tract, so if we're a census tract in Cohoes, if above the regional average, if you're 1, 2, 3, 4 thresholds above that average, you are given a score. So you can have up to a score of 36. We did some additional weighting, so really trying to particularly focus on low income and minority, those key environmental justice communities. So we created an aggregate score and ranked them on percentiles for each of the region, for each census tract. So not just there's a presence of different environmental justice communities, but really those that have concentration, significant concentrations of more, more than one community. So we really find those areas that we probably expect to have the estimated burden and need. Just take a quick snapshot through some of the areas. So we have really some of the most concentrated areas, some of the areas are within that 50th to 90th percentile. So we're just kind of showing a relative scale in those areas that are outside of the. Also highlighting too, the methodologies used for Justice 40 in New York State disadvantaged communities have even more statistical factors in them. So they're not really quite put. New York State disadvantaged communities information is great if you're looking at doing going after DEC climate change adaptation, or maybe looking at entirely broad New York State grant programs. But we really want to try to focus on those communities impact, that have safety impacts. So there's a lot of alignment, but not entirely. In Schenectady too, so And most. And within. Waterville, Troy, Cohoes, Green Island. And then. Kind of not so much in Saratoga Springs. There are also some rural ones too, but just wanted to focus, kind of zoom in on these areas as well. Any questions on the methodology or the areas that are showing up?
What's the grade?
The gray are, sorry, those are city limits. Areas kind of within like the jurisdiction of Saratoga Springs. So as an underlying map layer.
Excuse me, I have a. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Talk a little bit about, what we've seen through some of the crash impacts, and I think why it's helpful to, keep some of the three different ranges. That 90th percentile is really a small portion, less than 10% of the population, but has had a significant number of fatal and severe injury crashes. Using kind of a per 100,000 residents, that epidemiological sort of metric, there are more crashes happening in those areas. That doesn't, of course, include whether or not someone is, if you're from that part of, South Albany and you were involved in a serious injury crash on Central Ave, between Schenectady and Albany, they may not. So this is where the crashes were happening, not necessarily whether you were a resident. Yeah. Number of vulnerable road user crashes, and even more dramatic is the overrepresentation of vulnerable road user crashes, those folks biking and walking per resident, number of residents as well. So we're going to do with this data, we're going to also begin to show some additional origin destination data. Now that we've kind of primed these areas, we're going to look at where those destinations of folks are going, looking at the alignment of affordable housing, schools, and hospitals. The network screening work that we're doing, actually the emphasis areas, now that we have emphasis areas for each of the crashes, we want to find those emphasis areas that are overrepresented within equity priority areas, so that if there's, it may not be lane departure, but if we're looking at addressing equity, maybe it's intersections and vulnerable road users likely. And then using equity priorities to prioritize our network screening results. And eventually, as we finish crafting this memorandum and this portion of the project, really defining problem statements, and so that we're understanding strategies that can have significant impacts, in these areas. That we're really calling that out and keeping that front of mind as we get into the recommendations part. And not saying, oh yeah, no, this will also have a good effect on equity too. We want to make sure that we're coming up with some problem statements, making sure that we're having those, on our front burner as we go into recommendations. Any questions? I think some of the folks here have been seeing some of the network screening process. I know probably taught everyone here who's
There's definitely people online who haven't.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. Having a lot of great conversations. Just making sure I'm keeping track. So as we've been looking at, regional trends, kind of how does the overall pilot, what we're now getting into is looking at specific locations, and particularly want to thank Robert Zatowski on the call, who's been great, been helpful with so many questions. Been integral in developing the Clear Safety app. What they've done is there are safety performance functions for over 70 roadway types. And what that means is we are really able to do an apples to apples comparison for segments, whether it's 4-lane undivided and Albany County versus what looks like a similar road in Orange County, what looks like a similar road in Erie County. Types of, village intersections, urban intersections, rural intersections. So we're really comparing facilities to their peers across the state. Thankfully, now this is a great time to be doing this plan because now we're able to do this comparison and this analysis on state and local roads. So we get to look at that issue that we have, need for improvement for everyone. And we have some really high level performance measures now. Really now one of the best systems, state systems in the country. So really excited to be able to do this. So on the right here too, we see a figure from the highways, the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials Highway Safety Manual, really kind of our Bible for doing roadway safety planning. First is, so really part of this is the roadway safety management process. So kind of, how we want to begin to identify and develop safety projects, kind of a birds and the bees diagram. So, what we're doing at this stage now is doing network screening. We will be going out there and doing investigations and really diagnosing the issue. Just because something comes up through the statistical model, there's not any additional model steps that say, oh, now go do this project. We really need to go out, and we will be going out there doing 40 locations throughout the region. Then by, through that diagnosis, identifying countermeasures. I mean, those like prescribing medicine, what should we be doing at those locations? And then on the other half, really kind of looking at whether the project makes economic sense and, should be prioritized by CRTC or locals, then hopefully implemented and then evaluated after it's been on the ground for a few years. This chart is a whole lot. And what I just want to really show is that rather than just by looking at, crashes, there's been 4 crashes here, 5 crashes a year. Oh, let's look at by traffic. We've really jumped from, really looking at doing in our processes, doing number 2, number 3, all the way to 13. So it's really a fantastic adjustment. So just want to kind of use this from this table from the Highway Safety Manual to really kind of show some of the leapfrogging that we've done. To explain the network screening process, what that looks like underneath the hood is that there's a window that's 0.3 of a mile long, and it slides kind of in like 1/10 of a mile notches, and it calculates that potential for safety improvement at each steps to come up with overall sites with promise, sites where there is a potential for reducing fatal and severe injury crashes. So it gets really granular. So not just looking at, segments by a mile or, particular endpoints, that we really find those focused locations. And so what the safety performance functions do is they, based on observations of those similar 70 facilities throughout the state, a regression curve based on traffic volumes is made. So if you're a 5-lane divided arterial, divided arterial, say with a 2-lane turn lane, and you have 10,000, 12,000, 5,000 vehicles per day, you would have a predicted number of crashes. So that's really, so that arc, that safety performance function curve is really that baseline for, comparison. The potential for safety improvement is, so based on that safety performance function curve, the observed number of crashes for a location. And there's some statistical adjustment, but really that delta between what's observed and what's predicted is the potential for safety improvement, where we think, with potential countermeasures, there is room for, improvement. Maybe even go below, but really, for us to look at those places that are at first are overrepresented, with crashes, fatal and severe injury, particularly. The network screening app, does show those locations of the potential of, safety improvement greater than 0, and does have, and is focused on fatal and severe injury crashes. And then eventually, what's really helpful too, which is great for the planner and me, is that it comes up with really a simple stratification. So we get to kind of color code these, based on, what is called a level of service of safety. So using the percentiles of, potential for safety improvement, whether there's the 90th percentile, high, moderate, or maybe low to very low, potential for crash reduction. So it really gives us those those locations that, we should prioritize for crash investigation. So we're not just maybe chasing a fatal, responding to, the latest call that we get from, members of our community, that we really had to take a strategic approach to really working down, our safety priorities. I do not have the map in here right now, but we have these posted on the web map. We send them out to some of the jurisdictions, and we will follow up with that in an email to everyone here today. Some of the things that we're looking to do with this, I know we're getting in the home stretch of the meeting. With sort of the hotspot screening, we have taken a look at 2 screens. One, I'm really looking at fatal and severe injuries. 2, looking at vulnerable road users as well. So focusing on screens, an additional screen that uses vulnerable road users as well. In addition to that, what we'll be doing is building an overall priority safety network. So kind of some of the pieces which this will come together is taking this level of service of safety from CLEAR, seeing where we intersect with vulnerable road user high risk areas as defined by NISDOT, the equity priority areas that we've defined, looking at other planning factors through, we're compiling all the linkages studies, and also doing community engagement. So we're not just looking at overall high crash locations, but we want to look at those by having a priority safety network. There'll be a set of corridors and intersections that we'll look at further study, or look at really kind of maybe holistic improvements that both improve safety, accessibility for everyone. That's a lot, but I just wanted to pause to see if there were any questions.
How long is this expected to go for now until people forward?
Early next year.
Yeah.
So we're kind of beginning to aggregate all this together. And, as we get, working with, Schenectady and other stakeholders too, we'll take a little bit of looking at identifying with these corridors, You know, we were seeing some of the crashes where we also see these overlays too. And kind of taking a little science and maybe some art of, you know, some markers and being that this is some of the priority areas that we'd like to see. Maybe there's been studies already done, which we talked about, or there have been, but looking at where really those next steps that we're, you know, identifying places we want to go next. Or where we need that next funding. Any other, okay. Just had a couple of discussion items, you know, part of our project team right now, what we're doing is compiling and hearing through a lot of feedback on policy and processes. So one thing that we want be looking to do is for one, create that vision zero policy statement. So it's key that we're making, whether we have the year or just building that support for vision zero. There'll be you know, become a resolution to be adopted by CRTC at the MPO level, but also looking at a template for each jurisdiction as well. And as we look at recommendations too, looking to compile some, you know, maybe that checklist of local policies and ordinances. So as you're coming to us today, I mean, saying, oh, what do we do about speed limits, automated enforcement, all of these different, you know, different complete streets options. So maybe it is a menu of potential local policies and ordinances. So we don't necessarily say, oh, thou shall everywhere in the region as part of this plan. Are there, you know, we've been getting some great feedback and, you know, questions people been having. We've been talking speed limits, we've been talking some school zone enforcement. Are there any other local policies and ordinances that anyone else has been having questions and issues with that we should be looking into?
Well, the only thing I mentioned to you was the cameras and speed, you know,
Red light cameras.
red light
and
cameras
speed
and the
cameras.
school zone cameras and anything that is another tool. That we made a list of, you know, what tools that we have for law enforcement. And it's not huge. A lot of it comes down to they want more, you know, more staff to do more enforcement, which is just not happening. But if we could use those, we would use them. I don't, do we have any measure of if they've been successful? I talked to Bill Trudeau, it sounds like they're working.
I know early on when they had installed them, they had put together some reporting. I'm not sure. We can look into if they have more up-to-date reports.
You know, one thing we're also doing through this project too is looking at a lot of speed limit reduction, doing a number of pilots in that way. So we just want to make sure that, you know, through this plan, we're identifying some best practices of what's being done elsewhere throughout the state. Different, I know out in Rochester and Western New York, we have some good school bus camera enforcement programs. So there's a lot of different bubbles happening throughout the state. So we want to make sure that we're bringing that all together and giving everybody hopefully the latest and greatest information out there, because it's all sort of disparate right now.
Also, the automated work zone speed enforcement areas, those could also be looked at.
Yes, the city of Albany also installed out of nowhere last year some hybrid speed tables, speed bumps. So
Ones in Harbor Hill.
there's some in my neighborhood as well.
Oh.
They installed them, but forgot to straighten them for several months, which was fun to see.
You mean Nazi?
Yes. It was fun to see other people not see them.
Oh,
in their
gotcha.
cars.
Robert, question on the work zone thing. Is there a documentation out on the results of that already, or are they still undertaking it?
I can look.
Okay, that would be great. Thanks.
Are other jurisdictions besides DOT and the Thruway Authority eligible to do that?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Okay. That's part of our homework, we were looking into, but on the to-do list, I thought I'd just ask. All right. Thank you. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to come out here and see, a lot of the different bubbles happening.
Yes, the city would something like a citywide speed hump program, would that count as, would that be policy or ordinance? Or
Yeah.
always policy,
Policies, programs like that, yeah,
Yeah.
speed humps, traffic calming.
traffic, yeah, or or a turn calming program. A lot of cities do, a lot of cities are starting to do, turn calming at, either center line hardening or modular speed bumps that they can put in at the, to slow down right turns as well.
I still always, because I'm the engineer and I'm not the enforcement, and I'm not the educator. I still always advocate that we put too much on the engineering and not enough on the others. Because the city is a better place to walk and ride and be than it was 20, 10, 30 years ago. But that does not mean that the people are abiding by all the things that we put in place and using them to the way that they're supposed to be used. So that's always frustrating when you're trying to fix a problem or a perceived problem where it could be just an educational issue, but. It always, my frustration with these type of discussions usually stems from that, is that, you put a crosswalk with a signal with a push button. And you don't use it. Or you don't wanna wait. You know what, and then something were to occur and you go, you didn't use it in the correct manner, and you go, I didn't wanna do this, it's not on me anymore. We have a crosswalk that we're gonna relocate to make the crosswalk shorter. We're just gonna take it from this angle to perpendicular. But it's not going to be in the direct path of travel now, but it's going to be safer, and now they're saying, well, we should put a fence. Make sure people don't just cross, and I'm like. It's very obvious what we're doing, to make you travel here, but still, that was the recommendation of the positive intention to prevent people from still doing it. It's like, well, if they cross over here and they don't want to come over here where it's safer, I don't know. I can't do that for everything. You can't just micromanage and engineer everything.
You usually want to avoid fencing anyway on the street situation.
Tell that to you all day.
With their campus,
Yeah, they put a huge fence. To limit students from crossing Washington Avenue.
work,
Well, I would like to take the over under and how long the fence lasts, so it's current state once the semester starts.
is it new?
Mhm.
Okay, is it where they have like the dorms on one side and the campus on the other?
We're taking the over under after the meeting, so stick around.
Yeah.
Something relating to policies and ordinances, something that comes up with increasing frequency is mid-block crossings and RRFBs, which are kind of new to the region. I don't think there's many deployments around here, but people are asking us about them all the time and looking for local examples and best practices and lessons learned. And something that's not used anywhere in our region that I know of is the pedestrian hybrid beacons. Which is, an RRFB is you push the button and it blinks on the warning signs just on the side of the road, but the pedestrian hybrid beacon is above the travel lane, so it's one step up. But it's not a full signal. Now, we don't have any of those in our 4-county region that I know of. But for many applications, they are recommended by FHWA. For example, for a 4 or 5 lane road, FHWA says you shouldn't be using an RFB, it's too wide, people won't see it. But you should be using that pedestrian hybrid beacon. So maybe that's something that we can talk about and try to find examples from elsewhere in New York, or try to promote it, try to win over NICE to be more amenable to looking into that for state highways. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, I wasn't, no, I was the interrupter. I was gonna add, I think, a lot of jurisdictions that have had, I'll say, cities, towns, villages where the state hasn't yet embraced the Hawk or hybrid beacon have adopted policies that they can use traditional signals instead, traditional
Right.
pedestrian signal instead.
Just a full
Yeah.
three-color signal
Yeah,
instead.
yeah. They
Yeah, I
don't,
think we-
they don't actually cost anything much different, like in practice, they.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're saying a rapid flashing beacon and a signal?
No, those are very different. No, but a hawk,
Cause a hawk is,
first, it's already signal infrastructure. It's going mast arms,
yeah,
everything
I mean,
going all over.
we have a new signal superintendent, and he's younger and he is more open to more modern ideas. We have an area of the city, it's a very small spot, but where the signal is wooden poles. And it
Thank you.
only turns if you push it, and it needs to be replaced, and he's like, do we put a new signal there? I'm like, it's not a signal, it's a pedestrian signal, so. We're looking at putting the beacons back, but then that comes into the education and enforcement where people are like, well, red light tells me to stop. Well, also pedestrian in a crosswalk also is the law to yield
Correct.
to them. So you're saying that you're gonna identify, you're obeying that law. But this law, that one, I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna do that one. So that's where the education comes, because it's much cheaper and affordable for the city to remove that old signal, to put in an RFB and do it, than to put in $100,000 signal for a crossing in a road. So that's what we're trying to get to. It's difficult.
You just need the two buckets with the fake bricks, the pedestrians to carry.
The signal warrant discussion, that's a very interesting one, because cities and states are allowed to create their own signal warrants. It's not governed by the MTCD. I mean, if it is, there are warrants there, but you're allowed to add your own.
No, I think that, there's also some public information here, how we need to, through the plan, also kind of explain where these kind of come from and how we're all warranted.
Public information is an interesting one, because, beyond the, well, anyway, that's a different discussion.
No, that's great. I think, this gives Matthew and I a lot to, work and run with here. I think we'll also talk about some other things. I just wanted to get through some updates here. Community engagement. I know we have another public meeting this evening in Albany. We have, some more in Saratoga. Next week, our virtual public meeting, so we'll follow up with the meeting times. We have been meeting with jurisdictions. It's been great to talk about highway safety investigations, for do throughout the region, speed limit studies, and Albany, and Schenectady, Troy, Waterville, Green Island. Well, and we'll be doing 6 concept development engagement, sort of like charrettes, and 6 locations throughout the region. Replacing the demonstration projects, due to some requirements from FHWA, but we're really excited to go out there and come up with some really planning level concepts, do more focused community engagement, in 6 locations throughout the region. It's all from us here, Karen. 2 minutes to spare.
Okay.
Sure.
Any closing thoughts for Alex?
Here's a few updates.
All right, well, thank you very much, Alex and team, for everything. So we'll follow up, we'll send out the slides, and we'll send out the link to the network screening map that you wanted us to send, and anything else that you want us to share.
Should have public meetings too.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I believe we just have a couple of very brief updates from the Transportation Council. We'll go through these quickly. For our in-motion plan, this is the long-range transportation plan through 2050. Go to the website, it's in motion. Carrie knows what the website is, Carrie?
Emotionplan.org.
Yes, or something similar. Go to our website, you can find the link there. We now have a survey live. The link is here in the agenda, and it's up on the In Motion Plan website as well. We also have a number of in-person and virtual public meetings coming up in the coming weeks for the In Motion Plan, and some pop-up events that we'll be doing. So that's all up on the In Motion website as well. An update for our congestion management process. At the last planning committee meeting, actually at the July planning committee meeting, I presented on our new technical assistance offering, which is if you have a congested location in your community and you'd like us to take a look, we will look at all of the existing traffic data at that site through a number of sources. We'll do a field visit and we'll run through a checklist. And we'll write you a brief problem statement for that location. That we hope would really be a good first step into scoping out improvements for that location. So we will be sending out an email to all of our communities shortly. But if you have any questions or you have a location of interest, please contact me. And I'd be happy to get the ball rolling on that. Next updates, the TAP CMAX CRP awards were just announced. That's the Transportation Alternative Program, Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program, and the Carbon Reduction Program. All three have been rolled into one because they have similar eligibilities. So the awards for our region were announced and they're up on this press release on the agenda. And I think our region got a handful of TAP and CMAQ projects awarded. 7, I'm told. So please take a look at that. Carrie, do you have any other updates or anything to add?
No, just that the public meetings that we're having for the Vision Zero project were out in the email, the reminder email that I sent for this meeting. And so we had Watervliet last night, we're in Albany tonight, the virtual one is next Tuesday, and Saratoga Springs is Wednesday. Anyways, it was in the email. Next week, we're in Saratoga and virtual. Tonight is definitely in Albany at the Washington Ave branch of the library.
Okay. So our next meeting will be November 21st. We'll circulate an agenda in advance. Any closing thoughts from anyone in the room or on the call? Any other updates to share? Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we'll see you November 21st.
Chris, you haven't seen that side of the crosswalk?
Thank you, everyone.
Two buckets.
Thanks, everyone.